On the 24th of November 1994, Gordana Kotevski was Thursday night late-night shopping with friends at Charlestown Square. She left them at about 8:30 p.m. to walk less than 800 metres to her aunt's house in Powell Street. At about 8:45 p.m., her aunt heard screams, and when she went outside, she saw a four-wheel drive speed off. Gordana's wallet and shopping bags with clothes she had bought were found on the side of the road. She has not been seen since. That was 30 years ago. Now, this is going to be the first of two videos I will be making in which I will be focusing on newspaper reports that came out in the first month or so after she disappeared. I will also discuss a Facebook page that's been dedicated to Gordana and also a current proposal for a large-scale mural of her at Charlestown. Whilst I have discussed very little of Gordana in my previous videos, I do intend to make a few more videos about the investigations that occurred over the years and various other matters, which I hope to be able to do from early next year, that being 2025. Okay. Now, as Gordana was abducted on the Thursday night, the earliest newspaper report was not until Saturday, the 26th of November, 1994. The Newcastle Herald reported, "Stalker feared by missing girl." 16-year-old Gordana Kotevski had been stalked by an unknown man for 6 months before her sudden disappearance from Charlestown on Thursday night, a family member said last night. Her sister, Mrs. Carol Jagironowski, hopefully I pronounced that right, fears that the man Gordana had described as scary has abducted her. The Cardiff High School student was last seen by friends leaving Charlestown Square at 8:30 p.m. to walk the short distance to her aunt's house in Powell Street, Charlestown. A torn shopping bag and Gordana's wallet were found on the road in front of her aunt's house. Now, I'll just mention that the torn shopping bag did provide additional evidence in 2009, so about 15 years later. The Newcastle Herald reported on the 27th of February that year, "Advances in fingerprint and forensic biology have put identification of a partial fingerprint under the microscope." The partial fingerprint was on a ripped shopping bag found next to where Gordana was abducted, and which contained clothing and a purse. As well as gathering a print to match one from a suspect, police believe experts will be able to lift a DNA profile. Now, I'm not certain, but I don't believe they did get that DNA profile they hoped for. Anyway, a bit further on in the article, it says the partial fingerprint found on the Syndicate clothing store bag has become a strong piece of evidence. The bag contained a black top Gordana had bought, a Grace Brothers bag. Now, Grace Brothers has since become Myers, and it's actually still in the same location at Charlestown Square. So yes, there was also stockings in it and her purse. So I'll go back to that first article now on the 26th of November 1994. Mrs. Jaguranowski said yesterday that her aunt had heard screaming, but by the time she had run to the front of the house, a white Hilux four-wheel drive vehicle had sped off along the road. However, in a June 2019 NBN News report, which was by Jane Goldsmith, this indicated that the description of the vehicle may not have been accurate.
Detectives say they want everyone to keep an open mind about the vehicle. It wasn't necessarily a Toyota Hilux, and it may have been white, even yellow, but certainly a four-wheel drive utility with a cab.
She, that's Mrs. Jaguranowski, said a man Gordana had described to friends as that scary man had in the past 6 months followed her sister to Jesmond Woolworths and Jesmond Pizza Hut, where Gordana worked. Now, that scary man has, in later years, been referred to as the spook, which I think was a term her mother actually was using. So I don't know if Gordana actually used that, but maybe when I do a bit more research, I'll be able to confirm that a bit better. The man had turned up unexpectedly at shops she frequented with friends and would pretend to try on jeans and look at clothes. She doesn't know the guy from anywhere, Mrs. Jaguranowski said. It looks like he's been looking out for her and has taken off with her. She'd told my mother about the man, but she didn't think that much about it. She'd see him when she was shopping and say to her friends, "There's that scary man again." Mrs. Jaguranowski said Gordana had last seen the man on October 26 in a Newcastle jeans shop. So that's about a month before she disappeared. She had described him as being of Middle Eastern appearance, thin build, with sideburns, dark skin, black hair, 170 centimetres tall, and with a round face. Charlestown detectives said yesterday that they held fears for Gordana's safety and confirmed that a female screaming had been heard outside the Powell Street house at 8:45 p.m. Detective Sergeant Phil Rice of Charlestown Detectives said yesterday that police wanted to speak to the occupants of a white Ford panel van that was in the Powell Street area at the time, and who might have witnessed the abduction. The rear driver's side brake light of the panel van was not working. Police searched yesterday in bushland around Dudley, Redhead and Belmont, but failed to find any clue to Gordana's disappearance. An aerial search was made of the West Wallsend area west of Newcastle, and police were also following up several sightings of the four-wheel drive vehicle. Mrs. Jaguranowski said her parents, Peggy and Branko Kotevski, were worried sick about Gordana. Mrs. Kotevski was to have picked her up from the Powell Street house after the teenager went shopping at Charlestown Square with school friends. When last seen, Gordana was wearing a brown t-shirt, cream jeans and cream joggers. She had black hair, and is described as being of Mediterranean appearance, with a thin build and 160 to 165 centimetres tall. On the Monday, the 28th of November 1994, the Newcastle Herald had a further front page article. Private investigator, psychic may join search for girl by Paul Garwood. Police were no closer to finding 16-year-old Gordana Kotevski despite the efforts of a 290-strong search party, which scoured bushland yesterday from Taralba to Charlestown. A large contingent of Macedonian community, together with Gordana's family and concerned members of the public, joined police, volunteer fire brigade and state emergency service personnel in searches through rough terrain. Moves have been made by Macedonian community leaders to enlist the support of a private investigator in the search for Gordana, who police believe was abducted by at least 2 people last Thursday night from Charlestown. Family members are also considering seeking a Macedonian psychic in their quest for information about Gordana's whereabouts. We don't know what else to do, Gordana's mother, Mrs. Peg Kotevski, told the Herald yesterday. I am going by my own intuition and I feel she is all right. Those responsible for the abduction, are not people known to us. My husband would have known if there were any boys capable of doing anything like this. There is no one ill-hearted within the Macedonian community that would do something like this. Mrs. Kotevski said she was overwhelmed by the amazing support offered in the search for her daughter. Family have come up from Wollongong and Sydney, but I still feel so helpless, she said. I feel better with people here, but they will soon go back to their own lives. Gordana's father, Mr. Bronco Kotevski, had searched continuously since his daughter was thought to have been driven away in a white Hilux dual cab 4-wheel drive vehicle. So apparently Gordana's father actually continued his constant search for about 10 years. And he even travelled to other states, and he didn't end up desisting from doing that until a family member told him enough is enough. And so he had to be talked out of continuing. Charlestown police said 9 people saw the car speed off, but not one of the witnesses saw the vehicle's registration plates. Detective Sergeant Paul Nolan said a white Ford panel van was seen in Powell Street at the same time as the incident. Detective Nolan asked for the driver of the panel van to come forward, as he or she might be able to provide police with information. Police had few leads to follow last night from the day's search, which started at about 7 a.m. and continued until 4 p.m. The search would not continue today, but investigations would be maintained. So I guess the police were thinking they were running out of likely ideas of where to look, and perhaps they thought resources could be better used for other avenues of investigation. But it does seem a little too soon to stop searching, as the more searching you can do earlier, the better chance you've got. But anyway, there could have been another reason. Who knows? Then on Tuesday, the 29th of November 1994, the Newcastle Herald reported, "Family makes plea for search support." The mother of missing Cardiff teenager Gordana Kotevski made an emotional appeal last night to politicians and Telecom, and that's now called Telstra. So she was seeking financial help and mobile telephones to help continue the search for her daughter. So mobile phones were not in common use then and were quite expensive. So I guess that's why she was hoping to get them to help with the search. Police called off the official search for Gordana, 16, on Sunday night. So, question is, why? The Kotevski family and members of the city's Macedonian community widened the search yesterday to rugged bushland in Kurri Kurri, Cessnock and Dungog, but found no clues. "My husband went there and everyone else followed," Mrs. Kotevski said. A spokesman for the family said that Mr. Bronco Kotevski had searched continuously for his daughter since her disappearance on Thursday night, returning home to only eat and shave. Police believe Gordana was abducted by at least 2 people. Witnesses said the Hilux sported chrome wheels, wide tyres, a dented rear bumper and fishing rod holders. Detective Sergeant Paul Nolan of Charlestown Police said it was unlikely that an unknown man that members of the Kotevski family had said stalked Gordana in the past 6 months was responsible for her abduction. The man was probably someone who hung around shopping centres and may not have deliberately stalked the girl, he said. So, from the way that was reported, it sounds as if police might have dismissed the scary man as simply paranoia, and they probably would not be looking further into it. Hopefully that's not the case, and they're at least trying to find out who he was, even if it was for no other reason than to clearly eliminate him as a suspect. But as far as I know, they never found out who he was and no one's come forward, so makes you think maybe he was involved, but that's just supposition on my part. Then, on Wednesday, the 30th of November 1994, the Newcastle Herald was still showing interest and gives us some insights into who Gordana was and her interests. Friends Grieve as Hunt for Teenager Widens by Greg Bearup. Last night, Gordana Kotevski and her mates from Cardiff High had planned to travel to Sydney to see the touring American a cappella group Boys to Men. The trip has since been cancelled. Her friends sat yesterday, crying and consoling each other. Gordana has not been since seen since she left Charlestown Square last Thursday night, with her new outfit for the concert. In a massive operation, a 16-member squad of detectives has been formed to hunt for Gordana's abductors. The detectives have begun checking the owners of all vehicles which fit the description in the Newcastle area. If it yields no results, the search will be extended statewide. The principal of Cardiff High, Mr. Trevor Swan, said Gordana's disappearance had had a terrible effect on her Year 11 classmates and on students and staff throughout the school. Both students and staff helped in the weekend search for clues. Mr. Swan said that although Gordana had been a shy person, within her circle of friends, she took on the role of morale booster whenever anyone was down. She was born in Australia, but her Macedonian heritage was strong, and she was involved in traditional dancing outside school, Mr. Swan said. Gordana was also a keen soccer fan and somewhat of an expert on international soccer. He said she had excelled in drawing and art. Gordana's aunt, Mrs. Sonia Simonovic, said the family and the Macedonian community had been devastated by her disappearance, but had not given up hope. Yesterday, family and friends were still scouring scrub in the greater Newcastle area, looking for signs of the girl or the vehicle. She's just a little girl, Mrs. Simonovic said. She's got to turn up. Inspector Ron McSporran said more than 50 people had called a hotline set up for the case. He said the visit to her aunt's house on Thursday was not a regular event and that it did not appear to have been a planned abduction. Whether they followed her from the shopping centre or just saw her walking along the road, we just don't know at this stage, Inspector McSporran said. It seems the police opinion as to whether it was a planned or random abduction did change over the years, as in the 27th of February 2009 article, it did say one strong theory is that Gordana knew the pair. We believe that the people that we are looking at may have had some association with the victim. That is possible. Acting Northern Region Operations Manager Graham Parker said. The investigator leading the case, Detective Sergeant George Radmore, said certainly the abduction itself would have been premeditated, whereas before they were saying originally it was random. But anyway, then it seems that Detective Radmore had changed his mind again in 2018. As the Newcastle Herald reported on December 6 that year, he described the case as tragic and said he believed it was a random attack by people who were probably unknown to the 16-year-old. But I can say in his defence, there may have been reasons for that change of mind. As in the 2009 article, it says that with new leads that they had in 2009, Detective Inspector Parker confirmed police had suspects and they were from Newcastle or still living in the area. "We are closing the net," he said, which sounded very positive, but in the 2018 article it also said, Inspector Radmore told the Newcastle Herald on Wednesday persons of interest were identified, but it didn't reach the level of being firm suspects. So it seems there wasn't enough evidence to say they were responsible. But it does seem interesting they did have suspects. But anyway, it seems because of that, police then reverted back to their original belief that it was a random abduction. But anyway, I'll go back to the 30th of November 1994 article, and it says, police were still hoping to find the girl alive, but that as each day went past, the chances dramatically decreased. So that's why it's urgent to find her. Detectives said yesterday witnesses had given a number of different descriptions, but that it was believed to have been a late 1980s white Toyota Hilux with fishing rod holders on the bull bar. The vehicle might have had a roll bar with spotlights above the cabin and aluminium tray sides. Now, from that description and all the publicity, you think someone would have recognised the vehicle, but I guess with the reports focusing on that it was a white Toyota Hilux, perhaps if it was actually a similar vehicle, but not a Toyota Hilux which was being sought, then people may not have made the connection at the time. Because, as I said before, the more recent reports indicate it may not have been a Hilux, and it could possibly have even been yellow. I have thought, because it happened at night, maybe the street lighting caused confusion, because from memory, a lot of the street lighting did have a yellow tinge at the time. So that might have made it confusing whether the vehicle was white or yellow. So it might have been yellow and assumed white, or maybe some people thought it looked a bit yellow because of the light. The next day, on Thursday, the 1st of December 1994, there were some new developments. So the article says, police appeal to caller in missing girl inquiry. Detectives investigating the apparent abduction. Now, by apparent deduction, are they implying it may not have been a real abduction, or is it just another way of, how they say now, they'll talk about, everything being alleged. Not aware of that being the case at the time, but yeah, maybe they're implying it was something else. Anyway, so the apparent abduction of Cardiff schoolgirl Gordana Kotevski have appealed for a man who telephoned Charlestown police station yesterday morning to ring again. The man's call was lost soon after he phoned at 9:45 a.m. The officer in charge of the investigation, Detective Sergeant Paul Nolan, speaking late yesterday afternoon, said the man had not telephoned back. Detective Nolan said the man had started to tell the officer who took the call that he had seen a vehicle matching the description of the white Toyota Hilux being sought by police at Stockton on the night of Gordana's disappearance. As we were talking to him, the phone cut off, Detective Nolan said. We don't know whether he was playing games or had some valuable information. Detective Nolan said there was so far no other Stockton link in the investigation. Police plan to begin displaying today at Charlestown Square a mannequin dressed in the same type of clothes Gordana was wearing when she disappeared. These were a brown t-shirt, cream jeans and cream joggers. The mannequin will be at Charlestown Square at least until Saturday, and police officers will be present to take information from members of the public. I have a vague memory, I might have even seen that, but yeah, just a vague memory. Anyway, I am thinking you would hope it was there longer than 3 days, because even if the police officers did not continue being there, it may have jogged someone's memory who wasn't at Charlestown Square over those 3 days. So someone might only go there once a week or once a fortnight even. But anyway, I'll move on. On the Friday, the 2nd of December 1994, continuing with the Newcastle Herald, police hope computer image can help in abduction search, by Greg Bearup again. Police have made public a computer image of a man believed responsible for the abduction of Charlestown teenager Gordana Kotevski. Detective Sergeant Constable Mark Plant said a witness saw the driver of the vehicle in Powell Street. Police took the witness to Sydney on Wednesday to work on the department's new face computer imaging system. Now, I'm a little concerned why it took nearly a week for this to happen. I mean, maybe because it was new technology, could be why it took a bit longer to organise and set up. Anyway, this might be a good point to mention that I personally made a phone call to Charlestown Police with information I thought might be relevant at the time. I wasn't sure it would be particularly relevant, but and I don't know if I rang them before I saw the computer image of the suspect or after, but I did relate to something where I thought the person did have similar features to the computer image. But anyway, basically the reason I rang was because on the Friday night before Gordana disappeared, I was in Newcastle and I was leaving, I think it was called Jackson King at the time, or it could have been the Casbah, and some stage it became the CBD hotel, and that was destroyed by fire in 2020. But anyway, I left as it was closing, which would have been about 3:30 in the morning, and I was going to walk to the bus stop in Hunter Street to catch a bus. But as I was walking out past the chip machine, there was a young woman there getting chips out of there, and as I walked past, she offered me a chip. I think she would have been probably no older than early 20s. She appeared very intoxicated. I was a bit under the weather myself, but she looked a lot worse. But anyway, I accepted a chip, and she said she was going to the castle to meet up with friends who'd already gone round there. So the castle's now called the King Street Hotel. So I had to walk past the bus stop I was going to on the way there. So I walked along with her. Anyway, we got to where the waterboard used to be, out the front of that in Hunter Street. And a male person, I think he looked like he was probably in his 20s, maybe early 30s at the oldest, I would say. And he was walking from the opposite direction. He didn't seem to take much notice of us, and he appeared to be going walk straight past us when she offered him a chip. He stopped. It looked like he was assessing what the situation was between me and her. Probably assessed correctly the situation, and I think he might have surmised that I was not going to be of any sort of threat if he tried something. And then suddenly he just wrapped his arm around her, held her other arm tightly, pulled her against him. I think he might have grabbed the arm that was next to him and then dragged her along, started dragging her off in the direction he had been heading. I noticed her feet were moving, but they were moving as if the only reason was because she was being forced to move, so it wasn't voluntary movement. So obviously I knew this was not right. And even though I had no idea what I was intending to do, I did start to walk in their direction. But I'd barely taken one step, and I think he probably thought he had control of her. Once he had control of her, he turned, looked at me, saw that I wasn't going to just let him go. So as I said, barely taken one step, looked at me, then let her go, and then just calmly kept walking. So had me a little concerned what he had in mind. Yeah, so anyway, because I was concerned, I did walk with her right round to the castle. It wasn't that much further past the bus stop to go round into Steel Street and then to the corner of King. And then when went round the corner into King Street, she saw her friends who were out the front, so just said goodbye and then went back and to the bus stop and caught my bus, or waited for the bus till it came and caught it home. But anyway, this person, as I said, I did think he had some resemblance to the computer image, but there were also some obvious differences, I thought. So from my memory, his hair was longer than the computer image. Could have even been shoulder length. But I guess since that was before, nearly a week before the abduction, could have had a haircut. And yeah, I thought he had dark curly hair, or dark wavy hair, which could have been curly, because if you look at the image, it's short curly hair, but maybe if you had a haircut it would look more curly than wavy. The other thing I remembered was he also had an earring in one ear. Not sure which ear. Possibly that one. Anyway, so that's the right, but I'm not positive of that. So sort of had my doubts it was the same person, and even if it was, yeah, I didn't really think there'd be any way of working out who he was, so my information may not have been of much use to police anyway. But in the end, I just thought, well, it's really up to them to decide if it's useful. I guess they could have other information that possibly linked to it. So I did ring Charlestown Police, and I can't remember exactly what I said, but gave basically that information to the woman that answered, and she said she would pass that information on to detectives with my details, and if they wanted more information or thought it was relevant, they'd get back to me, and I never did hear back. So at the time I was assuming, yep, may not have been of any use. Anyway, I'll leave it there for this video, and in the second video I'll finish off the Newcastle Herald articles of December 1994 that cover the investigations related to Gordana's abduction. And I'll also, amongst probably a few other things, talk about the Facebook page that's dedicated to Gordana, and I'll also mention the proposal for a large-scale mural to be done at Charlestown, which will hopefully remind people of her disappearance and may spark them to report information, even perhaps people who may have been known information but were reluctant to do so at the time. So I hope you found this video interesting and informative, and if you would like to support me to make more of these videos, you can do so at Patreon. I'm David A. Elliott. Have a good one and see you around like a risol.